Jake Williams had never been good at directions. That much became painfully obvious the moment he stepped off the interstellar shuttle at Novaris Prime. The station was alive with color, noise, and movement, a chaotic ballet of humans, aliens, and artificial intelligences negotiating space and commerce. Humans like him seemed almost like small children in comparison to the towering Virelians with their shimmering exoskeletons, the lithe Turelians whose eyes glowed like tiny suns, and the skittish multi-limbed Florans haggling over neon fruit. Jake's attention, however, was elsewhere. He had a reputation among his friends back on Earth as someone who could find trouble anywhere, and he wore that title proudly. His plan was simple. Visit the interstellar market, marvel at the alien technology, maybe pick up some souvenirs for his niece, and then get back to his ship before he accidentally launched into another planetary crisis. It was supposed to be simple. He underestimated both the size of Novaris Prime and the sheer speed at which chaos could find him. He wandered into a side corridor, distracted by a display of levitating tools from the planet Zyphora. One of the tools, a multifunctional hand device, was so fascinating that he reached out instinctively, accidentally knocking a small container off a nearby stand. It landed with a soft plunk at the feet of a tall, armored figure. The figure bent down, and Jake realized too late that it wasn't just any alien. It was the Queen's personal aide, judging by the intricate golden insignia on its chest. I'm so sorry," Jake stammered. He picked up the container and handed it over, doing what any polite human would. He smiled, too wide, too nervously. "Accidents happen, right?" The walls pulsed with bioluminescent veins, giving the impression that the hallway itself was alive. Jake stumbled over his own feet, desperately trying to understand what was happening. When he finally reached the chamber, he found himself in a vast room filled with alien courtiers. Their eyes followed him, some curious, some calculating, some openly amused. And at the center, sitting on a throne that seemed grown from living crystal, was Queen Leora. She was more striking than any alien he had ever seen in his life. Her exoskeleton shimmered with colors that shifted like oil on water. Her eyes glowed faintly with intelligence that seemed both infinite and intimidating. "Jake Williams," she said, her voice a blend of musical tone and authority that made Jake's stomach flip. "You have joined the Virelian cluster not by mistake, but by intention according to our customs. The union is binding." I just handed back a tool. 24 cycles, exile, and what exactly did cycles mean in Virelian time? He felt sweat bead at his hairline. He opened his mouth to argue but realized there was nothing to argue with. The aides had already surrounded him, gently but firmly guiding him toward a more private chamber. He stumbled in, muttering under his breath. "How is it always me? Every time something like this happens. You talk." He ran his hands through his hair and tried to think. He had to find a way out. But how do you escape an engagement you didn't even agree to with a species you barely understood? Then he heard a soft knock. The door slid open and Leora herself stepped inside. She moved with grace, but her presence was overwhelming. Jake felt the weight of a galaxy in her gaze. "Do not be afraid," she said. Her voice was softer now, but it still carried the kind of authority that could command fleets. "You are not in danger yet, but you must understand the significance of this union. It is more than ritual. It is a statement. A human has never been part of this cluster in such a manner before. I'm really not, ready for interstellar politics or marriage to a queen. You're saying I survive because I'm clumsy. Some do not wish for our unity. They will challenge it. You may find yourself a participant in matters far larger than you anticipated. Then perhaps you will discover what it truly means to be human." Somehow that human resilience, the very thing that had gotten him into trouble so many times, was what the Queen seemed to admire. For a moment he considered trying to escape, but the palace AI floated in beside him again. Attempting escape would be unwise. The Queen's guards are highly efficient. Your survival probability would be low. "Great, so I'm married, and I can't run away. Just another normal Tuesday in the life of Jake Williams. I fix engines, that's my superpower, that and somehow surviving, that's about it." He had survived asteroid storms, mechanical failures, and more than one near-death incident in space. Somehow he thought he might survive this too. Humans were underestimated across the galaxy for a reason. They survived, they adapted, they improvised, and somehow he suspected he was about to prove that in ways he hadn't even imagined. The chamber's walls pulsed softly, reflecting the rhythm of his heartbeat. Outside, the palace corridors teemed with life, and somewhere, a queen waited for him to make a choice. One way or another, Jake Williams was about to step into a world far beyond anything he had prepared for, and somehow he felt that human stubbornness, ingenuity, and sheer nerve might just carry him through. He exhaled, straightened his jacket, and muttered to himself, "Well, here goes nothing." He stared at the ceiling, or what he assumed was the ceiling, trying to figure out how a simple misstep in a market had led him here. By the time he opened his eyes, the room was bathed in soft golden light. The palace AI, still floating lazily nearby, spoke. "Good morning, human. Your 24 cycles begin shortly. Queen Leora will see you for orientation." "I can barely orient myself with the local gravity. And now, I need orientation for marriage." Gravity here was slightly different from Earth's. He stumbled once, twice, and nearly fell a third time before catching himself on a railing embedded in the floor. When he finally reached the main hall, he found it impossible to take everything in at once. The palace ship was enormous, but not in a way humans normally understood. It was alive. The walls, floors, and ceilings seemed grown rather than built. Veins of luminous material pulsed, as though the ship had a heartbeat. Alien courtiers moved through the corridors, some gliding effortlessly, others walking with mechanical enhancements that made them seem faster than light itself. Leora was waiting in the central chamber, surrounded by advisors, aides, and a few alien nobles Jake could not name. She rose as he entered, her posture regal, and gave a nod of acknowledgement. "Good. You are awake. It is time to begin your introduction to the Viorlian court," she said, her voice both commanding and curious. "You will observe, you will learn, and perhaps you will contribute. Humans are unpredictable, resourceful, and capable of ingenuity beyond expectation. Your perspective may prove invaluable." He had survived asteroid fields with failing engines, navigated hostile alien worlds with nothing but his wits, and somehow made it out alive. Perhaps this was just another version of the same challenge. The first lesson began immediately. Jake was introduced to the palace's control room, a space that resembled both a living organism and a technological marvel. Screens formed themselves from the walls, displaying star systems, shipping lanes, and detailed schematics of nearby planets. Consoles pulsed with soft blue light, responding to thought, voice, and touch. Jake leaned over a panel, trying to understand the mass of controls. His fingers hovered over holographic interfaces, unsure where to start. That's when the alarm sounded. "Warning. Unauthorized access detected," said the palace AI in a voice calm enough to make it terrifying. "Unauthorized access?" Jake exclaimed. "Already." The Queen's advisors murmured anxiously, debating the proper protocol. Jake didn't hesitate. "Stop waiting, people, stand back." He reached for a control panel, but instead of pressing buttons like the others, he simply used the tools he had carried in his utility belt. A simple collection of Earth-standard gadgets, wires, and improvisation kits. He jammed a sequence of signals into the drone's communication channels. It twitched, spun, then froze midair. Jake grabbed a small electromagnet from his belt and suspended it around the drone, gently yanking it out of its flight path without damaging it. The advisors gasped. The Queen raised her brow. "You what, how?" one of the nobles asked. Jake shrugged. "I tinker, I fix things. I improvise, that's about it." Sometimes human perception and action are enlightening. He learned that each section was alive to some degree. Ventilation systems breathed, walls absorbed light, and floors adjusted to his weight. He accidentally leaned on a console that recalibrated a sector of the ship's gravity, sending a small group of courtiers tumbling. He apologized profusely, but they laughed. Somehow, his mistakes were endearing rather than catastrophic. During the evening, the Queen invited him to a more private chamber. "You have shown creativity and courage," she said. "Yet there is more to this union than mere survival. There are forces that will challenge it, and you will be tested in ways you cannot yet imagine. They see you as a threat. They will attempt to exploit your humanity, your inexperience. They underestimate you because you are human. That is why you may succeed where others would fail." And here he was about to put those skills to the ultimate test. Dinner was another adventure. Alien cuisine hovered in containers that adjusted temperature automatically. Jake poked at a glowing gelatinous dish. "Is this food?" "Tastes interesting." Yet somehow the more he embraced his humanity, curiosity, humor, and stubbornness, the more respect he seemed to earn. Later, as he wandered the palace halls alone, Jake reflected on what had happened. He was a human in a world that expected precision, perfection, and predictability. And yet he had survived the day not by following protocol, but by doing what humans did best, thinking creatively, reacting quickly, and trusting instincts. For the first time since stepping into the palace, Jake felt something he had not felt in a long time: hope. Perhaps humans were more than their limitations suggested. Perhaps being underestimated was their greatest strength. Suddenly, the palace AI interrupted his thoughts. Human, a situation requires immediate attention. The outer sectors are experiencing unexpected fluctuations in life support. You may be able to assist. An energy conduit had become unstable, threatening the outer sections of the ship. The Virelian engineers debated how to respond, but their solutions were slow, overly cautious, and predictable. Jake acted. He grabbed spare wiring, rerouted the energy flow, and stabilized the system in a matter of minutes. The lights in the outer corridors stopped flickering. The AI's voice sounded almost impressed. Human ingenuity, confirmed effective. Not always pretty, not always elegant, but it works. From a clumsy mistake in a market to saving the palace's life support systems, he had somehow gone from hapless tourist to someone of consequence in the Virelian court. And somehow, he had a feeling this was only the beginning. As he returned to his chamber that night, exhausted but exhilarated, he realized that humans had a way of thriving where logic and precision failed. Maybe it was luck, maybe instinct, but mostly it was resilience and adaptability, the kind of qualities that no alien culture could fully predict or control. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the pulsating walls, and whispered to himself, "I guess humans really are something else." Somewhere in the shadows, rival factions began to stir, unaware that they had just underestimated the human who accidentally wed a queen. And Jake, oblivious as ever to the danger ahead, had already proven that human chaos was not a flaw, it was a weapon. The alarms went off suddenly, shattering the quiet hum of the palace ship. Red lights pulsed violently through the corridors, reflecting off the bioluminescent walls. Jake Williams jumped, spilling his cup of synthesized coffee across the floor. He cursed under his breath. And of course, the first peaceful day in centuries ends in chaos. Multiple unauthorized vessels approaching. Security protocols have been engaged. And perhaps to challenge this unusual union. I can barely keep myself out of trouble, let alone survive interstellar politics and attempted assassinations. Jake realized quickly that this was no simulation. He was about to face real danger, and the palace's advanced defenses alone might not be enough. The first wave of attackers struck the observation deck. Cloaked ships had infiltrated the perimeter, launching boarding drones and assault teams. The Virelian guards reacted swiftly, forming defensive barriers, but the attackers were fast, coordinated, and prepared. Jake watched, paralyzed for a second, as the drones swarmed the outer hull. Then instinct took over. He dashed to the nearest control console, studying the array of blinking symbols. "Okay," he muttered to himself. "Think like a human. When in doubt, improvise." The queen appeared beside him, unflinching. "Human," she said, her voice calm amid chaos, "your actions are unconventional yet effective. Continue." They were sophisticated, yes, but predictable in their planning. He, on the other hand, was entirely unpredictable, a human in full survival mode. As he worked, he noticed one of the boarding drones approaching a section of the ship where civilians were present. He sprinted, threw a floating table in its path, and yanked a power cable from the wall. The drone sparked, stalled, and collapsed into a heap. Humans weren't the strongest, the fastest, or the most technologically advanced in the galaxy, but they were clever. They used what they had, they adapted, and right now that was winning the day. The queen joined him at the corridor junction, her energy blade humming lightly at her side. "You have saved lives this day, human. Yet the threat is greater than before. Not just a guest, not just a mechanic accidentally engaged to a queen, a partner." The thought was terrifying and yet somehow thrilling. Humans were known for stepping up when needed, for thinking under pressure, for surviving impossible situations. Maybe, just maybe, he had what it took. The rival faction's forces had infiltrated deeper into the ship. Jake and Leora moved through the corridors, using the palace's living architecture to their advantage. Walls shifted, corridors extended, and lights changed to confuse the attackers. Jake directed the queen's guards while improvising traps with whatever was at hand: cables, railings, even loose panels that became obstacles or distractions. A small squad of enemy Virelians cornered Jake in a maintenance bay. He froze for half a second, then grabbed a floating welding torch, ignited it, and swung it like a makeshift weapon. The attackers hesitated, unfamiliar with human improvisation. That hesitation was enough. Jake lunged, tripping one attacker into another. They collided, weapons clattering. He kicked one of the doors open, sending the others sprawling into a containment chamber. Leora appeared beside him, observing silently. "You do not follow protocol, yet you achieve results," she said. "That is remarkable. It seems to work out in my favor. Let's see, human logic versus alien AI. I just fix things, not always elegant, not always pretty, but it works." Courtiers and guards who had initially doubted Jake's presence now looked at him with a mixture of awe and respect. Jake slumped against a wall, exhausted, his clothes smudged with ash and dust. "Well, that was fun. Almost died, almost got killed, but hey, I survived. Again." Not by following orders, but by acting, thinking, and surviving. That is what it means to be human. That is why this union, though accidental, may yet bring unity and hope to the cluster. He realized for the first time that humans truly were underestimated across the galaxy, and perhaps deliberately so. As the palace settled back into its quiet rhythm, Jake wandered the halls, thinking about the events of the day. He had been terrified, overwhelmed, and outmatched, yet he had survived and excelled. That human adaptability, creativity, and courage, traits often mocked or dismissed by alien cultures, had turned the tide. Somewhere he knew this was only the beginning. Rival factions would return, threats would multiply, and the galaxy would continue to test him. But if the events of today were any indication, humans were more than capable of rising to the occasion. Jake smiled grimly. "Well, humans, looks like we just proved that even by accident, we can change the game." But in that moment, he felt the unmistakable surge of pride and determination that came from surviving impossible odds. Humans weren't perfect. They were messy, impulsive, and sometimes reckless. But in a galaxy that prized predictability, that was exactly what made them extraordinary. The palace ship glided silently through uncharted space. Its bioluminescent veins pulsed gently, as if the ship itself were aware of the tension and anticipation aboard. Jake Williams leaned against the railing, staring out at the stars. They were no longer in mapped space. No navigation charts, no familiar star systems, just the endless darkness peppered with distant lights. "Where are we going?" he asked, voice tight with both excitement and anxiety. Leora stood beside him, regal and calm as ever. "I do not yet know. The hyperspace route you activated was cloaked, unmapped. It leads us into territory unknown to even our most experienced navigators. You adapt. That is why you were able to save the palace. That is why I trust you. You see possibilities where others see only obstacles." The rival faction had retreated, but Jake knew better than to think they were gone for good. Their threat now loomed like a shadow over everything. The first challenge of this uncharted space appeared within hours. Sensors detected movement, a massive asteroid cluster, denser than anything mapped. Automatic shields would not suffice. The AI reported that navigating this cluster required constant adjustment, improvisation, and intuition. Jake smiled grimly. "See, humans shine in situations no one else can handle. Bring it on." He calculated trajectories using instinct and experience rather than pure algorithmic logic. Every maneuver required split-second decisions, anticipating not just the movement of the ship, but of the asteroids themselves. The Queen observed silently. "Humans are remarkable. You think like the universe itself, fluid, adaptive, unpredictable. That is why you survive where others fail." Jake improvised constantly, rerouting energy, reinforcing hull points, and recalibrating thrusters manually when the AI's predictions lagged. Leora assisted where she could, but she trusted Jake's instincts more than the ship's sophisticated systems. Finally, they emerged on the other side, battered but intact. Jake let out a long sigh, leaning back. "Well, that was fun. Almost died a dozen times, but hey, we made it." A fleet of ships unknown design approached. They were alien, heavily armed, and appeared hostile. Leora's expression stiffened. "Prepare for negotiation," she said. Jake raised a brow. "Negotiation with what looks like death on legs? Sure, I'm your guy." Alien voices, sharp and metallic, spoke in a language unknown to Jake. Leora translated briefly for him. They were pirates, scavengers who controlled this sector of uncharted space, and they did not welcome outsiders. Jake swallowed. "Great, hostile aliens, just another Tuesday for humans." She opened the dialogue, explaining their peaceful passage and offering trade. The aliens were skeptical, threats were issued. Their weapons powered up, glowing ominously in the dark void of space. Jake stepped forward. Wait a second, maybe there's another way. Some respect courage, ingenuity, bluffing works too. Watch this. Then, using his knowledge of human negotiation tactics, he spoke directly through the universal translator, projecting confidence and authority despite his nervousness. The pirates hesitated. Jake continued, leveraging their uncertainty, exaggerating the capabilities of the palace ship, and suggesting alliances against mutual enemies. He improvised constantly, adjusting tone and strategy in real time. The queen observed silently, a mixture of admiration and surprise in her eyes. Impressive. You negotiate without experience, relying on instincts. It is effective. Humans were underestimated, yes, but their creativity, adaptability, and courage often turned the tables where brute strength or strict protocol failed. The fleet departed, leaving the palace ship unscathed. Jake leaned back, rubbing his eyes. Well, that's done. Humans survive again. Who knew bluffing could save a palace ship? Your methods are unconventional, yet they work. You see the possibilities where others see only danger. That is the human advantage. Their energy patterns threatened to interfere with the ship's systems, and some seemed capable of penetrating the hull. Jake immediately got to work, analyzing the threat using a combination of Earth engineering principles and improvised tools. He directed the AI to create a controlled energy barrier, then physically reinforced critical points using materials from storage. He even rigged small electric pulses to gently repel the organisms, minimizing damage. The queen watched silently. Your ingenuity is astonishing. Humans are underestimated, and yet you thrive. The ship was safe, and the queen's trust in Jake had deepened. He had proven that humans were more than their weaknesses. They could adapt, improvise, and survive where precision and protocol failed. As the ship sailed through uncharted space, Jake began to understand the full weight of his situation. He was a human among aliens, untrained in diplomacy, combat, or politics, yet his very humanity made him indispensable. He realized that being underestimated was not a disadvantage, it was a weapon. Leora joined him at the observation deck again, silent for a moment as they watched the stars drift by. You have done well, human, she said softly. Perhaps your presence here is not an accident, but fate. Humans possess qualities that the cluster has long ignored. Courage, adaptability, and unpredictability, these traits may save more than just this ship. And now more than ever, we must trust in that power. The rival faction will not give up easily. There will be more tests, more threats, but with you, perhaps we can face them all. He had done all of this not with raw strength or technology, but with human creativity, courage, and sheer willpower. He thought about what the future might hold. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown dangers, uncharted systems, and alien species far stranger than anything he had seen. And yet, for the first time, he felt prepared. Humans were underestimated, yes, but that made them dangerous in ways few could anticipate. The Queen's voice broke his thoughts. Rest now, Jake Williams. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, and perhaps new opportunities to prove the strength of humanity. Never thought surviving asteroid belts and fixing engines would lead here. But I guess humans really are something else. And for the first time in his life, he knew that being underestimated was not a curse. It was the ultimate advantage. The tension in the palace ship was palpable. Jake Williams leaned against a railing in the central corridor, rubbing his temples. The rival faction had returned, stronger and more determined than ever. Their ships had tracked them through uncharted space, and now they were closing in on the palace ship with a speed and precision that was terrifying to behold. Leora appeared beside him, her presence calm but resolute. They are relentless, she said. They see you as a symbol. Their intent is to remove that symbol and weaken the cluster, but we are prepared. And you, she let her words hang, her glowing eyes fixed on him. You are essential. It will do so again. Their enemies were targeting him, the human at the heart of the cluster's unexpected unity. The first wave of attackers struck. Cloaked ships materialized from hyperspace, firing concentrated energy beams at the palace ship. The shields flared red as the beams collided with the hull. Jake darted to the control hub, his hands moving over the controls with practiced improvisation. Divert power to the forward shields, reroute auxiliary energy to the hull reinforcements. And wait, can we create a decoy signature? Now, he barked. The AI responded immediately, implementing his commands. Energy pulses flared, creating phantom images of the ship in multiple locations. The attackers hesitated, confused by the sudden display. Jake smiled grimly. Humans thrived in unpredictability, and that unpredictability was now a weapon. Leora joined him at the console. "You are clever, human. Few would think to use deception this way." Jake noticed a pattern. The attackers relied heavily on predictable calculations, algorithms based on standard Virelian tactics. Humans, however, were chaotic, unpredictable, creative. He exploited that immediately, rerouting energy to temporary blind spots in the attackers' sensors, allowing the palace ship to slip past their fire. "Now!" he shouted. He guided the queen and her guards through a series of maneuvering corridors, using the palace ship's living architecture to set traps. Walls shifted, corridors narrowed, and energy fields pulsed to disorient the intruders. One group of attackers collided with a shifting wall and was trapped temporarily. Leora fought beside him, her energy blade humming as she cut through attackers trying to bypass their defenses. Jake ducked and improvised, using railings, loose panels, and a portable plasma torch to create obstacles and distractions. Humans were physically weaker than most of these aliens, but Jake relied on creativity and quick thinking to stay one step ahead. The fight reached the central chamber. The rival faction's leader, a tall, armored alien with a blade of pure energy, confronted them directly. Jake froze for a split second, assessing the situation. He realized brute force would not win here, only ingenuity. He grabbed a nearby control panel, rerouting environmental systems to create temporary low-gravity zones. The alien stumbled as gravity shifted unexpectedly, and Jake used the distraction to strike with a reinforced energy conduit, sending the enemy sprawling. Leora finished the attack with precision, her blade cutting through the alien's weapon systems. Jake panted, adrenaline surging. "Humans survive," he muttered under his breath. And apparently, humans improvise brilliantly. Humans thrived in chaos, and Jake was living proof. Finally, the enemy leader retreated, their fleet breaking apart as the palace ship maneuvered with flawless improvised precision. The threat was neutralized for now. Jake slumped against a railing, exhausted but triumphant. Leora approached him, her glowing eyes filled with admiration. "You have proven yourself beyond doubt, Jake Williams. Not by following protocol, but by acting, thinking, and surviving. You have saved the cluster. Now, human, it is time to formalize what began by accident. The Union will be recognized openly, not as a mistake, but as a symbol of hope and strength for the cluster. The cluster will see this not as a human misstep, but as a triumph." And now, standing beside an alien queen, he realized the full weight of what that meant. The ceremony was simple by Virelian standards, but spectacular to human eyes. Bioluminescent lights pulsed along the walls, creating a living canopy of color. Alien nobles, guards, and aides gathered, watching as Jake and Leora stood side by side. The Queen's advisors murmured in approval. "You have proven that humanity is not weak, Jake Williams," Leora said softly. "You have survived, thrived, and shaped the outcome of events beyond your own understanding. Today, the galaxy sees the strength of your species reflected in this union. I guess humans really are something else." The adrenaline of the day still surged through Jake's veins. Well, that was intense. Humans survive battles, dodge attacks, improvise, and now we're officially married. You have shown that humans, though underestimated, possess qualities that can change the course of the galaxy. "You know," he said finally, "humans are messy, loud, and chaotic, but apparently that chaos can win wars, save lives, and even impress a queen." He had survived impossible odds, defended a queen, navigated uncharted space, and proved the power of human adaptability. He had become more than a mechanic, more than a tourist who wandered into the wrong ship. He had become a symbol of what humanity could achieve when underestimated, overlooked, and pushed to the edge. As the palace ship continued through the stars, Jake looked out at the infinite expanse of space. Rival factions would return, threats would emerge. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and dangerous. But for the first time, he felt ready. Humans survived, humans adapted, humans improvised, and humans, him, could face the impossible and come out stronger. The Queen stood beside him, her presence steady, her hand lightly resting on his arm. "You have proven the strength of humanity," she said softly. "And perhaps the galaxy has only begun to see what humans can achieve." "That's us," For Jake Williams, the human who had accidentally wed an alien queen, the chaos of the galaxy was no longer a threat. It was an opportunity. An opportunity to prove that humans, no matter how small, clumsy, or overlooked, could change the fate of entire star systems. He looked at Leora and for the first time felt not fear but excitement. The future was uncertain. The galaxy was dangerous. But humans, he and his species, would face it head-on as they always had, and somehow against impossible odds they would prevail. The stars stretched endlessly before them, silent witnesses to the triumph of human ingenuity, courage, and resilience. Jake smiled faintly, knowing that humanity had not only survived, but had become a legend.